This is my artifact exhibit from Rockingham County. It is entitled Artifacts of Early American Home Sites in Rockingham County, North Carolina. And in this display case are represented about 10 plantation homes and cabin sites from the 1700s up until about the time of the First World War. A lot of Rockingham history is represented here. In the right part of the case is a separate display case of two unique buttons I found at Valleyfield Plantation. In the back field next to the woods on the right, I found a Confederate Line C Cavalry C button from the Civil War period. Very valuable and rare button. To the left of it is another very old button. It's probably the only known artifact from the French and Indian War in this part of the state. Is a French and Indian War military button. Don Troni, I've talked to him about it, and he verified it, first verified it for me. Buttons before 1760 were blow molded and have two little holes in the back of them to let out the gases as they were molded. That's how you can tell a very old button. Between 1760 and 1840, buttons were stamped out of metal, and that's why we call them flat buttons, both civilian and military buttons. Like the War of 1812 buttons were stamped flat. But around 1840, they started making them two-piece again. So that also helps date home sites and plantations. But we don't know why a French and Indian War button is in this site, except that it was probably worn on the uniform of a soldier that may have been there during a muster ground exercise. And he might have, soldiers wear buttons from previous wars on their uniforms. A lot of times it was passed down by their grandfathers. And that's the only explanation I have on that, why a French and Indian War button would be in this site. I found 3 French and Indian War buttons, 2 in South Carolina and 1 in North Carolina. And the only one in North Carolina was found here. They found some French and Indian War buttons, I believe, at Fort Dobbs in Statesville. This has come out of a different plantation site on my uncle's farm in the Williamsburg community area south of Reedsville. That was destroyed by development also. The house was built right on top of it. Got a Kentucky flintlock rifle hammer out of there, along with about 20 flat buttons, pewter items, 1 coin, 1860 Indian head penny. But I just put 1 item in here, the flintlock rifle hammer. I hunted this site back in the late 1990s. All right, to the right is a case. I put military buttons and pins I found in Rockingham County, U.S. issued, that date from about 1850 to the First World War, 1918. The top button on the left came out of the cabin site where the flintlock hammer was. We don't know the name of the cabin or who owned that. But it's about an 1850 Mexican War Eagle button, and that's actually the first military U.S. issued button I ever found before the Civil War. It was on my uncle's farm. To the right of it is a Civil War Eagle infantry button with an eye on the shield. This was found at a stagecoach stop site in Wentworth, North Carolina. I also found a brooch in the site, period brooch, about 1860 brooch, which I gave to the landowner. If you go down on the lower row are all World War I buttons. The first one is on the left is a World War I cuff button, Eagle button. In the middle is a U.S. infantry pin that wore on their shoulder, lapel. It's got a screw back on it so we can date it to World War I. To the right of it is a World War I coat button, which was found in the cabin site on my father's land, on the top shelf. Well, this concludes the exhibit I have on Rockingham County's early American home sites. Hopefully this gives a perspective to the people of Rockingham County about their own history and how artifacts relate to it. Over time, it represents different periods in our U.S. history, also from the French and Indian War on up to World War I, so people can understand why history is important to this state. Thank you.